Although these pro YouTubers make it look really easy, there are some who are doing quite well on YouTube without having to achieve the cinematic look or use all the heavy tech equipment or software or any of that. And what they're doing is relying upon visual storytelling. So along the same lines as my last video on alter learning, I decided to take a look at some of the RV Living channels and the Vanlifer channels, because in a lot of cases, those channels aren't using a lot of the cinematography. They're relying on visual storytelling, and it's a natural progression because they're moving from place to place. And so the visual storytelling that they do is much more organic, and it's also less inhibiting, meaning what they're doing seems very simple. It seems achievable. And there are some things you can learn from these channels. And in my mind, it doesn't feel like a far reach. Like a lot of these channels are able to reach their audience and not use a lot of fancy equipment or software. And their cinematography isn't going to be at that Peter McKinnon level. And yet, they're able to get the views and engagement from their tribe. What better place to learn than from the Vanlifers and the RV Living channels? In this video, I'm looking at some ways to learn from RV Living and Vanlifers on the art of storytelling and why the Canon M50 is perfect for doing just that. Check it out. The reason why the Canon M50 is best for this is, one, it has a flip-out screen. It has a remote app, has face tracking, it's lightweight, and so it can be used with less expensive gear. And the video looks good pretty much right outside of the box. I mean, you can do some tweaking. Obviously, you would want to, over time, to do some tweaking and get some good effects. But like right now, this is just on auto mode. I'm not trying to achieve a cinematic look, and this is just doing a simple video. So these are the reasons why you'd want to use the Canon M50 to practice visual storytelling. One of the key things that I find interesting, and one little trick that I think you're going to like on learning what the Vanlifers and the RV Living channels are doing, is basically type into YouTube RV Living and then plus your location, or any location that you've been to. Things it does is you're familiar with those locations, let's say, and you can see exactly what kind of angles they choose to get, where they decide to film, how they decide to film it, and how it fits in our overall visual storytelling effect. This can be very helpful because a lot of times you go to a location or you go to a room anywhere, and the question really becomes, how do I provide the most visual impact from this location that represents a particular time and place and also drives the story forward? This is all done, of course, while allowing for naturalness to unfold. So with that in mind, when you come and let's say you go to a park, a lot of the RV Living channels and Vanlifers will go to a particular location, a park, and the park is just a park. There's nothing special about the picnic benches or the location. There can be, but for the most part, you get there and it's like, okay, well, what's special about this location? What am I going to try to capture? And how do I move my story forward? You have a location that someone has done that with successfully, then you can go to that location and look at their video and see what they've done and then try to duplicate something similar within your own story. It's a huge way to learn, because although you can learn from Peter McKinnon is probably not going to come near your hometown and be doing some location filming. But a lot of the RV Living channels or Vanlifers do. And so when you type in and you search for those, you can see exactly what they're doing for that location. And then by duplicating that, you get an idea of their process. It's much like taking a good passage from an author that you really respect. You want to write very similarly to what they do. So if you sit down and you physically write out what they've written in a particular passage or several passages that you like. When you do that, you kind of imbibe their writing style. And in that sense, you start to kind of understand the techniques that they're using. The same thing can occur when you take one of the RV Living channels or the Vanlifers and you go to a location they've filmed at. You're again imbibing the style that they've got. And then when you go to duplicate that, you could start to understand the art of visual storytelling in a way that's directly applicable in a location that you're entirely familiar with. In fact, a lot of these locations you might be bored with. But when you look at it this way, it provides new excitement, and it also makes it easier. So when you go to a different location, you can look for different angles and ways to provide visual storytelling because you've done it before based on someone else who's done it well. So one of the first things I learned right out of the gate is that it takes 5 or 6 times longer to do something when you're trying to capture it on film. So if you're trying to make a cup of coffee, you do those cool sequences that Peter McKinnon does on making coffee. When you look at the time it takes to actually make coffee, it's going to take 5 or 6 times, maybe 10 times longer to actually capture that on film in an effective way from many different angles. So here's one channel talking about just that.
I got up this morning at 5:30 a.m. to start this whole entire process. When it comes to filming a camping trip, the simple things that normally take maybe an hour or two now take 5 to 6 times longer, because it involves myself with my camera, my tripod, the drone, setting up all the different angles. So now I find that leaving at a normal time to go camping just doesn't cut it. I need a full entire day just to create the most simple scenes.
So these are 5 or 6 times longer to do simple scenes. So that's why it can be really cool to do a challenge, a coffee making video challenge. So you do the coffee, you film the scene of making a cup of coffee, and you make it exciting through sounds and make that your visual storytelling challenge, is to create that coffee scene, much like Peter McKinnon does. So the same thing goes though. You can take that same visual storytelling from making a cup of coffee and apply it to whatever else you're doing. Now here's an RVer, nomadic fanatic, and check this out. This is an example of how he captures one scene to use in his visual storytelling of his cat, because his cat becomes a character within his channel. Check this out.
The opening shot, I want to ask Jax if he's hungry, and then I want us to come outside to a food bowl that he's going to like. So I have taken the Canon M50 off of the stabilizer because I know I want to get a really low shot to the can of food. So what I'm going to do is set this over there somewhere, have the camera somewhere like this, and as you can see in the viewfinder, I want the bowl to be somewhere in front so you can see us walking out of the door and having him come to the camera when it's time to eat. Okay, so there's no food in the bowl yet. Okay, so I can move the bowl to get the right perspective in the viewfinder to see when Jax is going to come up to it right here. And we're only really going to get one chance at this one, because once I say, "Are you hungry?" he's going to come running outside.
Okay, so there's an example. It's like, okay, here's your furry friend that you have and you want to capture as a character within your visual storytelling. What kind of angle are you going to get? You know, what do you want to show? And also being flexible to anything, the dynamics of whatever you're doing. So it's, as the nomadic fanatic says, he's not necessarily scripting out everything, but he is kind of planning, okay, what kind of angles can I get and where can I be? Although there's some structure within the planning, there's also just allowing for whatever happens during the time that you're filming. This is critically important. Check this out, because when you're going to capture some simple scenes that you think is just, okay, we're just going to capture the car pulling out here, sometimes you catch unexpected moments. Check this one out.
Well, I thought, well, don't we need to record this? You pulling out for the first time?
Okay. I'm ready.
All right, it's rolling. Hold on.
Okay, so you have to look at the full channel to check out what happened with that. The RV crushed the truck. But if they hadn't filmed a simple scene, they would have missed that whole sequence, and it drove like several other videos within their sequence and helped their channel immensely. Sure, it was an accident. It was something to learn from that they kind of gave to their audience, while at the same time really capturing some drama in the moment. So you do want to do those regular scenes, even if you think they're normal. Some excitement can happen unexpected. So all those are pretty cool. And what I like about this whole process of looking at van lifers and looking at RV living channels is that not only them, but other niches that are just, they're not professional videographers. For the most part, although they'll have some tech, and depending on who they are, they might use some filters and some software, but in general, a lot of them rely on visual storytelling. There's a natural storytelling that happens from them going from one location to another and just following what they do throughout the day. So you can use the same thing to apply to whatever you're doing within video marketing or whatever visual storytelling you're doing. When you try to duplicate the same thing, you can actually take those same ideas and apply it to even if you're in a room, to naturally go through the visual storytelling and to map it out beforehand a bit. Obviously, you want to do an outline and you want to get an idea of what you're doing. So when a van life or RV living channel goes to a location, they are going to kind of map out, okay, what's interesting in this location, what's visually interesting. They might even look to see pictures that people have done before and use that. But in the same time, they're also going to just go for the organicness because it provides something new and it's also part of who they are. Their character drives their channel. So in the end, this whole exercise of kind of looking at these makes it much easier to go, okay, I could achieve the same thing. And you're not getting wowed by all the tech and you're not getting overwhelmed by these cinematic videos. And so for me, I found it allows me to focus a lot more on visual storytelling than all the other stuff. So then when I'm plugging in all the extra tech, later, it enhances what I've already done. So the visual storytelling is a core. You have to know that piece. If you look, it's much, you can actually garner an audience with that visual storytelling if you do it right, then all the tech and all the other stuff. And it becomes much more of a channel that people are going to follow for that reason, for what you can do at a very basic level, instead of following because you might show some fancy tech, this camera versus this camera, or this tech versus that tech, and that's something that people can copy very easily, But when you get into the visual storytelling and you make it a progression, I think it's much better to go from that core because it's part of your character and part of the reason the tribe will follow you. And that is much harder to copy than it is to say, here's this camera compared to this camera, and then making a breakdown of the specs and then showing some visuals. That's easy enough to copy. You just have to get the cameras and boom, you're done. But when you inject visual storytelling in your own spin on things in a larger context, it becomes much easier for you to connect to the right tribe and to make your channel grow or your videos grow or make that connection than it is if you're just relying upon tech. So those are my thoughts on the whole idea of using these other niche channels to kind of open up exploring visual storytelling from an entirely different perspective. So I hope you found that helpful. And if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot for watching.